So our attention is our most scarce and precious resource. And what this obviously means is that we have to pay significant importance to the manner in which we are using it. And I'm constantly sort of catching myself wasting and expending my attention in frivolous manners, caught in these distraction loops, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, watching stupid shit on Instagram or whatever it may be. And I'm noticing how, particularly in our modern world, which some may call an attention economy, whereby your attention and awareness is the thing that is being commodified and extracted and measured, particularly by corporations and advertisers. Particularly in this age where it seems there are so many different shiny things and alluring things to capture your gaze, it is difficult to maintain centered and sovereign in our consciousness. I think sovereignty, to me, means being sovereign over your attention and what you pay attention to. Because, of course, like the sort of cliche saying goes, where your attention goes, your energy goes, energy follows. And so if your attention is constantly being caught up in bullshit and triviality and distraction, then that is where your attention, that is where your energy is really circling in on. This is also why many yogis and saints and gurus always talk about spiritual realization and attainment as being the realization and control of one's attention, I suppose, or the recognition and the developing awareness of one's attention and its movements and its habits. I think as you become more and more conscious, more and more aware, what really happens is you're becoming more aware of the patterns that arise within your awareness. And whichever pattern we are most conscious of in that moment is always where our attention is being directed towards. And so if we take a moment to really look at where our attention is, we immediately come to what we may call the present moment. And this is the essential nature of what meditation is. Meditation seeks to return you to who you already are. And it seeks to expose you to that. Because you see, in our usual patterns of living, where we are constantly sort of captivated by what we need to do, things to do in the future, all the sort of burdens and obligations, sort of the weight of living. When we're caught up in that sort of cycle of being in the world or constantly looking ahead, we rarely look at what is. But when I instruct you, of course, to pay attention to your attention, you are immediately like a meditation dong brought to this experience of reality. And now, the simple activity of paying attention to attention, it's not just a way to sort of self-improve in order to sort of become more aware of the patterns that sabotage you and the ways you distract yourself and the subtle low-grade hypnosis that sort of is most people's waking experience of life. Paying attention to your attention brings you to your immediate reality, of course, the nature of your being. And your role as not just a sort of a witness of reality, but also a participant of reality. Because, of course, where your attention goes to, it sort of indicates where you are participating in reality. We can't do anything clearly without paying attention. If I sort of lift up a cup of tea without paying attention to that action, chances are I'm going to fail to do that action. I'm going to spill it everywhere. But if I want to do something correctly, if I pay close attention to it, then chances are I'm going to be able to achieve that. So when we talk about doing things we want to do, if we have a particular purpose that we're striving towards and we want to pursue on that purpose, obviously, paying attention to that, it sounds obvious, but many of us, if we think about it, we have a purpose, we have something we want to do. But if we seriously look at the time that we spend when we are awake and the things that we attend to and what we are investing our energy in, look at your screen time, for example. How much of that is dedicated to meaningful pursuits, or is it sort of being just scattered away in frivolous pursuits? You need to seriously contemplate that. But that's one side. That's one side of the sort of the major purpose of paying attention to your attention. Paying attention to your attention can allow you to sort of recalibrate your awareness, understand where your awareness is sort of being wasted in certain meaningless things, and then to sort of recalibrate and redirect to things and pursuits that are much more meaningful to you. And this required, obviously, being able to take back, honestly, sort of looking at what you are doing. And then with that knowledge, with that awareness, being able to change. One of the worst things that can happen is to just see yourself caught in this loop, this pattern, but not doing anything to change it. There's sort of this reluctance to change sometimes, because perhaps it's difficult, perhaps it's straining to sort of break these habits. And I think we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, obviously. We shouldn't try and crack ourselves as a whip and try and shame ourselves into being better. But what we should understand is that, like, looking at your patterns, even if you're not immediately changing them, looking at your patterns and having a sustained awareness of them will enable you to see deeper into the reality of what it is, in particular, what is causing your tendency to sort of lose yourself in Instagram scrolling or something, or some other indulgences that you may have. If you understand why you have them, then that can enable you to change it, to sort of evolve through it. If you don't have any awareness of the root cause of it, you try and just sort of on a surface level suppress it by just, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to focus really hard on not doing it. But the cause obviously is not fully resolved. Then perhaps that deeper problem will manifest in a different way. Maybe you'll fall into a different bad habit or whatever. But the point is that awareness and the directing of your attention to this is the root, the cause of your patterns, asking those sort of why questions that often we tend to avoid. You can sort of go in this sort of free association exercise with yourself when you're introspecting. And this is maybe a contemplative exercise as well, where you sort of think of a pattern that you have that you wish to change, and you sort of free associate based upon it. And you allow your consciousness to sort of just throw up whatever comes up, This is perhaps what Jung called active imagination, where you sort of actively imagine the causes. Yeah, you're engaging in a conversation with your consciousness. But I wanted to sort of come to a sort of more of a metaphysical tangent, I suppose, which follows from what I've been talking about with paying attention to your attention, and how when you pay attention to attention, you're coming to the real I don't know, the real cusp of reality, the immediate present, right? And when you're there, you're seeing clearly, right? And of course, here I am here, and it's difficult to speak much more about it because there's a kind of this basic ineffability with regard to the immediate present, with regards to the immediate confrontation of reality. And ultimately, paying attention to attention takes you into an inquiry into who are you and who am I and what is this? And what is reality? What is the self? Who knows really? And I'm noticing myself becoming hyper aware within this moment. And that hyper awareness takes me into this mode of being where speaking was difficult, really. And I guess that ties into what many people describe as a mystical experience. A mystical experience is a sense of communion or a direct realization or revelation of something transcendental, something beyond ordinary reality. A seeing into the nature of them. For me, mystical realization stems from understanding that the I that the ego sees with is the same I that God sees with. So I, Ryan, or Mother's Mind, the name of this thing, is an expression of God. And people get in this world currently a bit confused when the word God is thrown about. Because ultimately, in this current age of mankind, we have almost become dissociated from our natural divinity. And I'm calling for you, the viewer, to recognize that divinity is existence itself. There is something profoundly, you may call it strange or marvelous or absurd or radical about existence itself. So in my sort of formulation of philosophy, metaphysics, and reality, I have a similar view to what many other people had used similar as well. That God is nature and nature is existence. So we, this human form, is just one of the many expressions of nature or God, whatever. It's the same thing. They're just words that point to the same thing. And so ultimately, when you are attending to your attention, you are turning up a mirror to oneself and you're sort of watching all the fabrications, the patterns, what sort of Hindus may call Maya, these sort of the stories and show that consciousness plays to itself, that God plays for itself. And this whole journey takes one into sort of dissolving what we may call the false self, the identification as a separate, skin encapsulated ego, as Alan Watts would put it. And the recognition that ultimately reality, whilst it does have the appearance of separation, divided objects and stuff like that, such as this mug or this headphone, this object. We have the word that creates this sort of sense of a separate existence to this. As we know from quantum mechanics, when you zoom into reality at a very, very small level, the subtle levels, you realize that this sense of separation is actually an illusion, of course. Our entire fabric of reality is undifferentiated. It is all entangled. It is this big field of excitatory potential, or whatever word one wishes to put it. And if you think about a cell, when you zoom in on a cell in a microscope, it looks like there are these sort of patterns. You have the nucleus and the cell membrane around it, but then you zoom further in, and a pattern that you see at one level, at one layer, when you zoom in, it sort of expands into many, many more patterns and many, many more patterns. And so one object at one scale is many objects when you zoom in at a finer scale. One is many, many is one. And of course, when you zoom in further and further and further, what do you find? You find the fabric of reality, I suppose. And of course, the double slit experiment revealed that what may appear from our limited human perception of a particle is actually a wave of possibility. And I suppose in our current paradigm of understanding, we are really grappling with this. This sort of energetical dynamic nature that underlies the image of matter. But I realize I've got very, very philosophical now. And I suppose this is a sort of a representation of my contemplations at the moment with regards to sort of bridging the quantum with sort of more mystical teachings, and understanding the nature of consciousness is always coming back to that sort of question. And as a sort of a way to sort of sign off, in my sort of investigations, I'm realizing that there are many latent potentialities and possibilities of consciousness that in our current sort of materially dominated paradigm, which is, well, currently collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions, there are many latent possibilities, what we may call psychic capacities, which are, increasingly being realized and reassembled and remembered. And many of these capacities of the human mind and human consciousness they were known in ancient times when we were much more, I suppose, in touch with the divine presence of reality. But it's been a sort of, I don't know what to call it, but in our sort of technological development, we sort of forgot the magic inside of us and expressed the magic through our technological innovations outside of us. So yeah, what do you do with that? What happens when we remember who we are, when we remember our divinity, and we understand that with our attention, we can tune into different things in reality. In a similar way that when you pay attention to playing an instrument over and over and over again, you become more and more experienced with that instrument. You become better at it. In a similar way, when you meditate and pay attention to your attention over and over many, many times, you become very, very, very perceptive to the subtle dynamics of your consciousness and reality itself. Just checking if it's on. And particularly there are many subtleties of consciousness that we miss out upon. Just sort of just under our nose, and we don't see it because of a perceptual blinder that is obscuring our vision. Perhaps it's your reactivity to things, your instinctive habits of sort of distracting yourself with comfort, whatever they may be. We have these habits and they go unnoticed. But when you bring your attention to them, you see them, you notice what you haven't noticed before. And when you notice things, you learn more about yourself. I guess I want to leave you with a sort of a final thing to consider, which is, who are you? What do you see when you pay attention? And what are you going to do with this moment? I'll leave that at that. Enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.